everybody, in this video we're going to talk about the different sampling methods you can use to select a sample from a population. So take 3 deep breaths and let's make this math easy. Okay, so the main idea with sampling methods is that when you're choosing a sample from a population, you want to choose the sample in a way that makes it so that the entire population is fairly represented. Because if your sample is biased, then the results of your study will also be biased. And it won't be an accurate assumption that you can take the statistics you calculate and assume that they actually represent the parameters of the entire population. So there are several different sampling methods that statisticians will use, and some of these sampling methods are more likely to give you a fair representation of your population than others are. So the first sampling method we're going to talk about is simple random sampling. So a simple random sample is one in which every member of the population has an equal chance of being chosen to be in the sample. So for example, you could put all of the names of everybody into a hat and then randomly draw names out to select the sample, and that would be an example of simple random sampling. And then the next type of sampling is called stratified sampling. And so in stratified sampling, basically a population is split up into subgroups, and those subgroups are called strata, and then you take random samples from each subgroup with sample sizes proportional to the size of the subgroup. So for example, let's say that a certain state has about 39% Democrats, 37% Republicans, and 24% independents. And this is something that is known because of the results of the elections and things like that. So we have this state, and if we wanted to get a sample of 1,000 people using the stratified sampling method, then we would basically say, okay, well, what's 39% of 1,000 people? That's 390, and so we would want to select 390 people from the voters who are known to be Democrats. And then you would say, okay, then I'm going to select 370 people from those known to be Republican, because 37% of 1,000 is 370. And then you would choose 240 people who don't have any party affiliation. And this would be an example of how to do stratified sampling. Another type of sampling is called cluster sampling. So in cluster sampling, you split the population up into subgroups, which are called clusters, and then you choose a set of subgroups to be selected in the sample. So for example, if SUU wanted to survey all of its students, they wouldn't send out a survey to everybody, but they could do cluster sampling by randomly selecting 10 classes and giving the survey to all the students in those classes. So in this case, the subgroups or the clusters would be the classes, because all SUU students are split up into these subgroups of which classes they're enrolled in. And then when you randomly select 10 of the classes to give the survey to, that's when you're selecting a set of subgroups to be in the sample. So that's what cluster sampling is. The next type of sampling is systematic sampling. So in a systematic sample, you basically select every nth member of the population to be in the sample. So for example, a gym could survey its active members by asking every 25th person who checks in to answer the survey. So the key here is that you would have to be measuring the population of active members, because if you wanted to measure the population of all of its members, the inactive members may not be coming into the gym, and so this method wouldn't work. But if you wanted to survey the people who do come to the gym regularly, then this would be a good way to get a sample from the population of everybody who does come to the gym regularly. And so in this case, n would be the number 25, but you can use any number for n. So you could select every 100th person or every 10th person or every 4th person. It doesn't really matter what you choose n to be, but the key is that you're selecting every nth member of the population to be in the sample. The next type of sampling we're going to talk about is convenience sampling. So convenience sampling is one of the sampling methods that is more likely to not give you a fair representation of your population. Because convenience sampling is basically when the sample is chosen by just selecting whoever is convenient. So for example, if you wanted to survey SUU students, you could go to the living room and ask people to answer your survey, and that would be a convenience sample, but it may not necessarily be a fair sample because some SUU students never hang out in the living room. And so your results may be a little bit skewed because you're not actually getting a sample that represents the entire population. But sometimes it may not skew your results too much because it's very possible that all the students that are in the living room are diverse enough that it would actually give you a pretty fair result, even if there are some SUU students who never go and spend time in the living room. And voluntary response sampling is very similar because voluntary response sampling is when the individuals in the sample volunteer themselves to answer the survey. So an example of this might be if you had a website and you wanted to ask your readers to give their opinion on some popular issue. And if you posted the survey on your website, the readers of the website are going to choose whether they answer the survey or not. And so they are a voluntary response sample because they are self-selecting themselves to be in the sample. And in a later video, we'll talk about some of the biases that can come from this type of sampling. So the basic idea of this lesson is that there's several different sampling methods you can use to select a sample from a population. And ideally, you want to have a sampling method that's going to give you a fair representation of the population as a whole. So stratified and cluster and systematic sampling are all really good ways to get a good sample. Convenience sampling and voluntary response sampling will tend to bias the information a little bit more, but sometimes it's just too difficult to do the other types of sampling methods depending on what population you're measuring. And so sometimes you just make do and you say, I know that convenience sampling isn't the most ideal, but this is the one that's going to work and actually be reasonable for me to do my study with. So these are the different sampling methods. If you have any questions, let me know, and I hope you have a great day.